I have yet to meet a little girl that hasn't fantasized about becoming a princess. In today's sewing tutorial, I'll walk you through the construction steps for the Enchanted gown. This pattern was first put out over 10 years ago for the Evangeline Ghastly doll and has since been made available for 16 different fashion dolls, and today we'll be sewing it for the 12-inch articulated Anne. I can still remember the doll show I was attending when one of my customers recommended this particular design. Before starting our sewing tutorial, I'd like to say a quick thank you to my friend Cindy for suggesting this design. Let's go ahead and get started. The Enchanted gown for Anne consists of the following pieces. We have the center bodice, the side back and the back section, the two collar pieces as well as the sleeve flounce, and then the skirt. In order to get started with the construction, we'll take our pieces, take some small clips in towards the curved edge, and sew the side backs to the backs and the side fronts to the fronts. We'll press those seams open and then add the trim to the front center seams. With our trim applied, we'll place the back sections to the front and sew the shoulder seams. With the shoulder seams pressed open, we'll grab our sleeve pieces, place it right sides together to the armhole opening, and get the sleeves sewn in place. We'll trim down that seam allowance, place the back of the bodice to the front, and sew the side seams. With our side seams pressed open, we'll grab the flounce section of the sleeve. We'll place each piece right sides together and sew that top seam. Then we'll press the seam open and sew the contrast to the exterior portion of the sleeve flounce. From here, we'll trim down that seam allowance, turn the flounce right side out, and give it a press. With our flounces pressed, we're going to grab a needle and thread and run a gathering stitch at the inner circle of the flounce. We're going to pull the gathers gently to fit the sleeve. You'll match the center top of the sleeve opposite of the sleeve seam to the seam on the flounce. We'll place the sleeve flounce right sides together to the sleeve and hand sew it in place, sewing in the round. With the flounce pinned in place, you'll take your needle and thread and attach the two pieces together using small short stitches 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge. With your stitches in place, you'll check both sides to make sure that everything looks to be good, and you'll move on to the second flounce. With our second sleeve flounce in place, we're going to press that seam allowance up into the sleeve and add some trim right around that seam. Once the trim is applied to that seam, we want to get the initial pressing of that flounce. It's very important that you steam this well so that it lays nicely on the doll as you see here. So at this time, we'll set the bodice to the side and we'll grab our collar sections. We'll place the front and the back of the collar right sides together on both pieces and sew up the back seam as well as around the rounded edge. And then we'll get our trim applied. You do want to ensure at this time that you place the fusible interfacing to the wrong side of the fabric before cutting the collar pieces so that they have the ability to stand up. We'll trim down that seam allowance, turn the collar pieces right side out, and give them a press. With our pieces turned and pressed, we'll apply the trim. One thing you want to note at this stage is that we have two different size collar pieces. The one that I'm holding in my right hand is considered the left collar section that connects to the left back opening, and that's indicated in the words on the pattern piece. So the smaller piece, when you're looking at the dress from the front, is attaching to that right side, but is considered the left back opening because it lines up with the finished back edge of that left back opening. So I'm going to put the smaller side to the right, the larger side to the left, and apply the trim as shown here. With our trim attached to the collar pieces, we'll place the collar to the bodice and get it basted in place. That smaller section will be placed to the right side of the front view, matching the trim you attached to that front seam. We'll walk it around the neckline and it'll stop 1/4 of an inch from the left back opening. You'll take that second larger piece, attach it to the left, looking at it from the front view. You'll line it up with that trim on that front seam. You'll go all the way around the neckline, and that larger piece will line up directly with the back raw edge of the right back opening. We have our collar basted to the bodice, and off camera I've completed the lining to the bodice utilizing the exact same steps, with the exception of turning up the waist edge 1/4 inch and giving it a press, and also turning in the lining of the sleeve 1/4 inch and giving that a press as well. So at this stage, we'll place the lining to the bodice with right sides together. We'll sew around the neck edge and down that left back opening. That will leave the right back opening unsewn, both on the lining and on the bodice, and then we'll zigzag or serge those together after we get the bodice attached. With the lining attached, you do want to check both sides. If everything looks to be good, you're going to turn the lining to the inside of the garment and press along the neckline and the left back edge. With our collar securely in place, we're going to turn our attention to the skirt. We're going to sew the side front sections to the front panel as well as the side back sections to the back. Next, we'll sew the front and back sections together at the side seams. With our seams pressed open, I'm going to machine stitch the trim to the seam right at the front panel, and then I'm also going to create the lining in the exact same steps. With our trim in place, we'll take the lining pieces to the skirt, place it right sides together, and sew along the hem edge. With our hem pressed, we're going to zigzag or serge the lining and the exterior portion of the skirt together at the left back opening. At the sewing machine, we'll run 2 rows of gathering stitches along the waist edge of the skirt assembly. With our gathering stitches in place, we'll pull them gently to match the waist edge of the bodice. You'll also want to make sure that you line up your front trim as well as your seams. You'll want to check both sides of that seam carefully to make sure everything looks good. Flip the bodice to the right side and make sure that your trim pieces are lining up properly. And if everything is good, you can go ahead and pull that lower gathering stitch out and press that seam allowance up. With the seam allowance pressed up, we'll finish the right back opening with a zigzag or serge stitch connecting the lining to the exterior portion of the dress. With a needle and thread, you'll hand finish the folded edge of the lining to that waist seam, as well as catch the inside of the lining to the seam along the sleeve flounce. Next, we'll sew the center back seam of the gown with right sides together from the hem edge to the dot as indicated on the pattern. Then we'll get a quick fit to the doll, add some snaps, and get those final photographs. I think the photos show that Anne's desire to become a beautiful princess has been realized. I can almost hear her footsteps as she laughs and giggles through the halls of the castle. When creating the design in this scale, I would encourage you to choose a lightweight fabric that will take a little bit of a steam to create a nice cascading flow to the flounce of the sleeve. If you have any questions about the instructions for this court-inspired gown, please list that in the comment section below. As always, I thank you guys for your time and for watching. I invite you to hit that like and subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.